Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your essential stack of sources, the transcripts, the articles, the research, and really just turn them into immediate, actionable intelligence.
Exactly.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into the mindset of, well, massive success. We're focusing specifically on a high-profile investor and entrepreneur. I mean, this is a man who has built and sold companies for billions.
And this isn't going to be one of those, fluffy motivation pieces.
No, not at all.
Right.
This is a sometimes brutal, often controversial look at the rules, the disciplines, and the, frankly, non-negotiable sacrifices required to achieve what he calls over and over again, personal freedom.
That's the perfect way to put it. That's our mission here. We've got these incredibly rich transcript excerpts from the Diary of a CEO, and they give us not just the philosophy, but the hard, pragmatic rules for execution.
For everything from personal finance to risk management.
Right. So for you, the learner, we're going to unpack 3 core areas. First, the so-called DNA that separates a successful entrepreneur. Then, this concept of radical prioritization. And finally, the unflinching discipline you need to actually keep and grow wealth.
And the sources are remarkable because they are so specific. We're getting exact percentages for investment diversification, these brutal anecdotes about working with Steve Jobs.
And even the due diligence required before saying I do. It's such an unusual mix of high finance strategy and almost a personal survival guide.
Right.
So our core question for this whole conversation is this. How does this small percentage of successful people, the ones who believe they have this necessary DNA, how do they manage their time, their capital, and their relationships to ensure not just growth, but, sustained multi-decade achievement?
We're basically looking for the blueprint of relentless discipline that holds it all together. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start at the emotional and psychological ground zero, the origin story.
You have to.
We have to begin with the moment that our source says was the absolute defining moment that clarified his entire path.
Yeah.
And, maybe counterintuitively, it all involves him getting fired from an ice cream store.
It's a moment that sounds so small on the surface, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it carries this immense psychological weight. He was young. He took the job to be close to a girl who worked in the shoe store nearby. I mean, a very normal human motivation.
We've all been there.
Right. But on day 1, the owner asks him to do this truly unpleasant task, to scrape gum off the Mexican tile floor, gum that customers had just spat out after sampling the product.
And he refused, just outright.
Yeah.
And the source details his reasoning. He didn't want the girl from the shoe store to see him on his hands and knees doing what he saw as, a subservient, humiliating task.
His quote was that the task was bad for my brand.
Incredible. And the owner fired him on the spot.
Immediately. And that abrupt termination was, in retrospect, the catalyst. It revealed this fundamental binary choice in the working world.
He saw it instantly.
He realized right then that there are only 2 kinds of people. There are those who own the store.
And those who scrape the floor. And at that exact moment, he just cemented his decision to pursue ownership, to avoid ever being in that position again.
To never be beholden to the person who dictates what kind of cleaning you have to do.
It seems like that single moment just crystallized his entire motivation for entrepreneurship, which he says is something far more profound than just chasing a paycheck.
Oh, absolutely. He's very, very clear on this. If your main drive is greed, or just the pursuit of money, you are, in his words, already on the road to failure.
So money is just the yardstick.
It's just the measuring stick of success. It is not the goal itself. The real engine, the true pursuit, is what he calls the undying love of freedom. For him, this level of success is the only path to real personal freedom.
The ability to control your time, your decisions.
For long-term destiny, all without corporate oversight or having to rely on a single employer.
Okay, so this leads us to what is probably the most controversial part of this section. His belief that this path isn't for everyone. He calls it the 3% rule.
Yes, and this is where the conversation gets very blunt.
Right.
He genuinely believes that only about 1/3 of the population has the unique combination of risk tolerance, resilience, focus, and maybe even luck, or karma, as he puts it, that's required to become a truly successful, wealth-generating entrepreneur.
But wait a minute. I mean, calling 2/3 of highly ambitious, educated people, like the ones he teaches at Harvard, mediocre consultants, isn't that a huge oversimplification?
It is.
Does the source offer any nuance on that? I mean, can an employee still get financial freedom even if they never own the store?
That's a really necessary challenge to that idea because the word mediocrity is so charged.
Right.
And he uses it not really as an insult to their ability, but as a judgment on their willingness to accept the ultimate consequence. He observes that 2/3 of his Harvard cohorts, they're drawn to consulting, to banking, to corporate law. And his point is that while they lead financially successful, comfortable lives,
Yeah.
their jobs are structurally designed to avoid decisions of consequence. They advise, they analyze risk, but they rarely take it on themselves.
So they get so good at mitigating risk that they never actually take any.
They avoid the singular, risky decisions that are required for massive personal freedom. He argues they can definitely achieve financial security, but they will never have that total time and decision-making freedom that's reserved for the owner.
Okay, so if you're listening and you identify with that risk-taking, freedom-seeking 1/3, what are the practical steps? What does he say to do to increase your chances of success?
The source gives very clear, almost clinical advice here. First, timing is everything. He urges people to start earlier or early to mid-20s.
Why then, specifically?
Because you have less burdensome risk. Later in life, you've got a mortgage, college tuition is looming, family obligations. Failure at that point is catastrophic.
But when you're young and living in a cheap apartment,
Failure is just a tuition payment for the next venture. You learn, you get up, and you go again.
and failure, he stresses, is an expectation. It's not an anomaly.
Precisely. You have to assume your first, second, or even third attempt will fail. That's just the cost of learning the domain. You only need one success to change your trajectory forever.
But maybe the most counterintuitive piece of advice for a young, eager founder is this 24-month apprenticeship.
Yes.
Walk us through what that actually means and why he says it's non-negotiable.
Well, the temptation is to just jump in, right, to launch immediately.
Of course.
He says no. Spend 24 months working in the sector you are passionate about, even if you have to work for a minimal salary or for free. The goal isn't income, it's intelligence gathering.
You need to gain that baseline knowledge of the whole ecosystem.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
How the supply chain works, who the major players and competitors are, what the regulatory environment looks like. You need to know all of it.
So it's about understanding all the cogs in the machine rather than
Yeah.
just building one cog yourself.
Exactly. I mean, imagine trying to build a new fintech product without understanding compliance or the political forces at play.
You'd be blindsided.
You will be blindsided. This apprenticeship eliminates those blind spots. It gives you a comprehensive three-dimensional view of the sandbox you're about to play in, and it dramatically increases the chance that your first attempt might actually be the one that works.
So it's knowledge acquisition that's just disguised as employment.
That's the perfect way to frame it. So now that we understand the deep-seated motivation, this undying love of freedom, we have to move to the practical method you need to execute on that.
Right.
And this leads us to the single most critical attribute for success. It was a difficult lesson he learned directly from one of the most brilliant yet demanding minds in business history, Steve Jobs.
Okay, let's unpack this Jobs anecdote because it really does illustrate this idea of radical focus perfectly. This was back in the early 90s.
Right. They were developing educational software. This included updates for massive titles like Oregon Trail,
A classic.
a classic, and they were facing this huge task, updating software used in over 100,000 schools. So the team goes to Jobs and they say they need a substantial budget, maybe $12 to $15 million, to do market research.
They wanted to survey students, teachers,
To
parents.
find out what features they wanted in the next version. A very logical, standard approach.
And what was Jobs' exact, famously uncompromising response to this idea of listening to the market?
It was pure classic Jobs. It just demonstrated the singular vision. He said, flatly, I don't give a shit what the students want. It's what I want. They don't know what they want till I tell them what they want.
Wow.
And then he followed that up with a command, then fucking shut up and do what I say.
I mean, the lesson was painful, but it was transformative. Vision has to be protected from distraction.
And that harsh interaction is the origin of the core concept we're analyzing here, the signal-to-noise ratio.
So let's formally define this. What is the signal versus what is the noise?
The signal is ruthlessly defined as the top 3 to 5 things you absolutely must achieve in the next 18 hours.
18 hours. So it's immediate. It's mission-critical execution.
The focus is deliberately tight. It's not next month, not next quarter, it's today. And the noise is literally anything that prevents you from executing on those 3 to 5 signals.
That includes what? Personal distractions, social media.
Social media, family issues that can be deferred, the urge to check the stock market every 5 minutes, or even things that seem productive, like planning for next year when today's crisis isn't solved.
So it's about achieving an optimal quantifiable ratio, isn't it?
Yes. For Steve Jobs, the effective working ratio was 80% signal and 20% noise, and you knew this was the expectation.
How so?
Because Jobs would be emailing at 2:30 in the morning and expecting an immediate reply. Your focus had to mirror his 80% commitment to the mission.
And we have examples of other people who push that ratio even further. Elon Musk, for example.
Musk is cited as operating as close to 100% signal as is humanly possible. He has almost no noise in his life.
Which is why he accomplishes things that seem impossible to other people.
It is. But the source makes a really interesting observation about the trade-off there. That 100% commitment is why Musk is, in his words, very awkward socially.
Right, things like small talk, long family dinners.
Or even returning calls that aren't mission critical. All of that is defined as noise, and he just doesn't allocate the mental bandwidth for it.
We also see other high-level execs managing noise by imposing strict time limits. I'm thinking of Jeff Bezos.
Bezos is famous for his afternoon rule. Reportedly, he refuses to make any consequential, high-impact decisions after 1 p.m.
Why is that?
Because he finds the noise of the day, the accumulated distractions, the email backlog, the fatigue is just too high. He saves his high-signal, high-judgment decision-making power for the morning.
And the terrifying threshold here is simple. If you let your ratio slip to 50-50, where distractions equal execution.
Failure is guaranteed. It's that binary.
That is an incredibly unforgiving framework.
Yeah.
So for the learner listening, how do you practically identify your signal? How do you actually filter out all the distractions?
Well, the signal is often something that just imposes itself on your attention.
Right.
It's the task that, if you leave it undone, will have immediate negative consequences for the mission. He still relies on simple, low-tech methods.
Like sticky notes?
Exactly. Using sticky notes on a mirror or a computer monitor to list those 3 to 5 daily must-dos, the physical act of seeing them just constantly reinforces their priority.
But the true entrepreneurial skill here is the judgment call. Being able to distinguish genuine signal from those alluring traps of irrelevant noise, especially when the pressure is on.
Absolutely, because noise often masquerades as urgent signal. A critical customer complaint might feel like signal, but if your real signal for the day is closing the funding round that keeps the company alive,
Then that customer complaint has to be delegated.
or scheduled for the 20% noise window. The core leadership competence is the judgment to instantly filter what demands 80% of your time and what can be ignored or shifted.
He also talks about this concept of yin and yang,
Yeah.
that these successful people often have deep, eclectic pursuits.
Mm-hmm.
Playing guitar, photography, collecting crystals.
Right. Meeting master watchmakers.
When do those things become noise versus a necessary mental escape?
They are crucial for mental and creative decompression. You simply cannot sustain an 80% signal focus without a proper release.
So when does it cross the line?
These activities go from escape to noise the moment they start infringing on that immediate 18-hour mission. If you're neglecting the 3 must-do tasks because you spent 4 hours learning a new guitar riff, that's noise.
But if the guitar lets you refresh your mind so you can tackle the signal with new energy.
Then it's a tool for execution. It's part of the system.
And this focus is just so vital because the life of an entrepreneur is one of staggering emotional volatility. He shares this remarkable personal example of managing simultaneous catastrophe and euphoria.
This is such a critical insight into the emotional management you need. He describes getting 2 calls on the same day.
Okay.
The first one delivered the news that a company he backed was going bankrupt. A $10 million loss. Just gone.
Wow. And the second call?
30 minutes later, a second call came confirming another one of his portfolio companies was going public at a 450x return.
So utter financial catastrophe followed almost immediately by utter financial euphoria. That is a massive amount of emotional whiplash.
It is. And the lesson is that through both pieces of news, the disastrous and the amazing, the disciplined focus has to always snap back to the signal.
You mourn the loss for 5 minutes, celebrate the win for 5 minutes, and then...
And then you ask, what are the 3 things I must execute in the next 18 hours? The emotional management of entrepreneurship means not letting the highs or the lows dictate your next move.
That's what Jobs taught him.
Exactly. Focus on the signal, O'Leary. That's it. So if the signal-to-noise ratio is the internal discipline you need, we now have to look at how that mindset projects externally.
Right, especially when the stakes are highest, like pitching an investor or managing a team.
And this begins even before you speak a single word. It starts with the aura of confidence.
Okay.
In any high-stakes interaction, a negotiation, a pitch, a critical meeting, the source claims he can tell if a person is a winner or a loser in the first 2 minutes.
Just by observing them.
Just by observation. It is all about projected confidence. This means aggressive, confident eye contact, standing or sitting tall, dressing for success, not necessarily expensively, but intentionally.
And just projecting that readiness to do battle.
Exactly. And the interesting point here is that he believes this nonverbal communication, this aura, is teachable. It's not something you're born with.
Right. It's a skill you can develop.
Exactly. He advises people to practice it. Look at yourself in the mirror, stand up straight, maintain focus and eye contact during conversations, not just to project, but to show respect and that you're absorbing information. The goal is to establish that narrative of competence and readiness within the first 60 to 120 seconds.
So once that aura is established, the pitch itself has to navigate and avoid what he calls the 3 killers that will instantly disqualify an entrepreneur from getting capital.
These 3 killers are sequential, and failing on any one of them is terminal. It's game over.
So what's killer number 1?
Articulation. Can you explain your idea, the problem, and your solution clearly in 90 seconds or less? If the idea is rambling or confused or takes 5 minutes to explain,
The pitch is dead on arrival.
dead. Killer number 2 is operator risk. This answers the question of why you are the right person, the uniquely qualified individual or team to execute this idea.
Because ideas are cheap.
Execution is everything. The investor needs to know your domain expertise, your past successes, or, critically, what you learned from your past failures.
So even failure can be an asset.
A huge asset. If you have a unique team, or if you've failed twice but learned lessons no competitor has, that mitigates the operator risk. If you just have a great idea and no proven ability to execute, you will be passed over.
And then there's killer number 3, the ultimate disqualifier. Knowing your numbers.
This is absolutely non-negotiable. You must speak the language of business fluently. You have to know, off the cuff, how big the market is, how fast it's growing, what your gross margin is,
And most importantly,
the exact month you will break even.
let's clarify for the learner. When we talk about knowing the gross margin, what level of detail are they looking for?
Gross margin is your revenue minus your cost of goods sold. It's the pure profitability of your product before you even factor in overhead, like salaries or rent.
So it reveals if the core product is even viable.
Exactly. If you're selling something for $100 and it costs you $95 to make it, your gross margin is only 5%. That's incredibly fragile. An elite investor expects you to know that figure instantly and to have a plan to improve it.
And if you ace the first 2 but fail on the numbers,
His language is harsh. He says you deserve to burn in hell.
that is certainly unforgiving. But is that level of expectation common among elite investors, or is that just him?
I'd say it's very common for high-stakes venture capital. Maybe the phrasing is extreme, but the underlying point is that failing to know your numbers shows a profound disrespect.
For the opportunity, for the investor's time.
And for the fundamental economics of your own business. It just signals that you're an amateur, not a serious operator.
Okay, moving beyond the pitch, let's look at some unconventional management insights. Specifically, the importance of silence, which is something he learned from one of his female CEOs.
Yes. She told him that his natural conversational style, which was talking 2/3 of the time and listening 1/3, was completely ineffective.
And her advice was,
To reverse that ratio, talk 1/3, listen 2/3. He realized he was just talking over valuable information.
and he immediately put that advice to the test in a high-stakes litigation settlement.
He deliberately used silence. He sat across the table from the opposing party and just maintained eye contact. He refused to fill the conversational gap.
And as the silence stretched on,
Past 60 seconds, toward 90 seconds, it became really socially uncomfortable for the other person. And under that pressure, the opponent just blurted out information they should have kept secret.
specifically revealing their true settlement price.
Yes. That tactic, just listening and being silent, saved him 2 hours of negotiation and likely millions of dollars.
Another critical management principle is his staunch policy on hiring. Merit only. Ignore all social metrics.
He is unyielding on this. He states that he does not care about sex, origin, race, or social background. The only factor for hiring is the ability to execute the mandate.
And he credits the diversity of his staff to this policy.
He does, and he views nepotism hiring family or friends without merit as a horrible disease that has to be avoided because you fundamentally can't fire a non-performer who is also family.
And he uses a very specific high-risk, high-reward system for screening new hires, the contractor test, which is based on the Swiss apprentice system.
This system is designed specifically to mitigate the company's financial risk when hiring someone new.
How does it work?
Instead of a standard package with benefits and stock options up front, the new hire comes in as a project-based contractor for 4 to 6 months. They get paid a much higher salary than a typical employee.
But no benefits, no options.
Right. The company pays a premium for their time, but it limits its long-term exposure.
So the contractor has to execute a specific, measurable mandate in that time.
Exactly. It's an intense, deadline-driven assessment. If they succeed, if they execute the mandate, and critically, if they fit the culture, then they get offered the full long-term employment package. It forces the hire to prove their competence before the company takes on the full financial and legal burden.
What's fascinating is the data this approach yields, particularly about the success rates of companies led by women in his portfolio.
It's a really compelling set of metrics that challenges the typical VC stereotype. He notes that the majority of his successful nascent startups, the ones that generate the wealth that offsets the 8 out of 10 investments that inevitably fail, are run by women.
And why does he think that disparity exists?
He attributes it to strategic differences in goal setting and consistency. He says the women-led companies set achievable, sustainable growth targets. They aim for maybe 15 to 16% growth.
Whereas the men?
The men in his portfolio often target a much more aggressive 30% growth, but the key difference is the hit rate. The women-led companies hit their targets over 90% of the time. This leads to predictable, sticky corporate cultures and low team attrition. The men hit their ambitious targets only about 65% of the time.
Which leads to volatile cultures and higher staff turnover when they miss.
Exactly. His inclusion is that consistency often beats aggressive, inconsistent ambition.
Okay, so we've established the mindset and the execution strategy. Now we need to shift to the second major theme, how the successful entrepreneur keeps and grows the wealth they create.
Right.
And this section is anchored by the investment philosophy he learned from his mother, Georgette, who he describes as a fiercely independent woman of Lebanese descent.
And Georgette's strategy is the ultimate example of long-term discipline. Over 55 years, her portfolio's performance was, in his words, extraordinary. It actually outperformed professional hedge funds.
Why?
Precisely because of its simplicity and its adherence to ironclad rules. Her foundational principle was simple, but brutally effective. Never outspend yourself on any 30 or 60-day cycle.
So this means avoiding what he calls the stupid spending trap.
Yes. He targets the easy, everyday waste that just destroys your compounding power.
Things like spending $28 on lunch every day.
Or buying clothes that you just never wear. He argues that money should be relentlessly working for you in an index fund, instead of being spent on transient consumer goods that depreciate or just vanish.
So he frames every non-essential purchase as a decision to actively kill compounding growth.
That's it.
Let's detail Georgette's precise investment mandate. What were her 2 primary asset classes and her diversification rules?
Her rules were designed for maximum safety, yield, and diversification. First, she mandated allocating 20% of every single cash paycheck every week without fair.
20%.
And second, those funds were placed into just 2 assets: large cap, debt-free, dividend-paying stocks, and long-term 7-year telco bonds, which at the time had these high yields of 6.5 to 8%.
So she was essentially indexing before broad market indexing was even a common thing, wasn't she?
Precisely. She used these rudimentary mutual funds that exclusively collected stable, debt-free, dividend-paying stocks. She was looking for safety and predictable cash flow, not for speculative growth.
And her diversification rules were paramount.
Never more than 5% in any one stock or bond, and never more than 20% in any one sector of the economy. And if a holding rose past that 5% threshold, she would trim it back, forcing discipline and rebalancing.
The power of indexing and that long-term consistency is the real takeaway for the learner here. It shows this strategy isn't just for billionaires.
This is the most crucial part. The sources provide a clear mathematical path to guaranteed millionaire status for the average working professional.
What's the formula?
If you earn a $70,000 salary starting at age 25, and you consistently invest just 15% of that, that's less than Georgette's 20% rule, into a low-cost S&P 500 index fund.
So performance suggests.
You will have over $1.5 million by age 65. It just underscores that wealth creation is a matter of discipline and time, not luck or brilliant stock picking.
He also advises on avoiding debt for luxury, but purchasing quality items that can function as assets.
Right. He cites his mother's strategic purchase of high-quality items like Chanel jackets. They were expensive at first, but they retained their style and eventually became valuable vintage assets.
And he applies this to his own passion for watches.
He views them as tangible assets that mark milestones, but only if they are purchased outright. Never on debt. The rule is firm. Never go into debt for consumer luxury. If you can't pay for it in cash, you can't afford it.
Okay, let's turn to real estate, which is the primary asset for most households. He has a very rigid rule about debt management here, the 13 rule.
The 13 rule states that your mortgage and the total cost of maintaining your home, so taxes, utilities, insurance, must never exceed 1/3 of your income. And this rule is designed to prevent financial stress when the economy inevitably tightens.
And why is this rule so vital right now, especially with refinancing rates?
It's the classic mistake people made during the period of cheap money. When rates were 3%, people thought they could afford a massive house because the monthly payment was manageable.
But they were over-leveraged.
Hugely. They often bought homes that required 60, 70, even 80% of your monthly income to service. And now, as those teaser rates expire and they have to refinance at 7% or 8%, they are financially paralyzed.
Buying too much house is a guaranteed path to financial stress.
And it jeopardizes your ability to stick to Georgette's 20% investment rule.
It's also important to clarify the house's role here. It's both a primary asset and a major source of debt.
Correct. For most people, it feels like their primary asset, but you have to remember it's also the source of your largest debt. If you only put down 10% on a $1 million home, you only truly own $100,000 of equity at that moment.
The other $900,000 is the bank's asset.
Exactly.
So for a young single learner focused purely on capital creation, should they rush to buy a primary residence?
His advice is firm. No. If you're single and your focus is purely on maximizing your investment returns and your freedom, rent cheap and maximize your diversified portfolio.
The primary use case for buying a house is
Either when you're starting a family and you need that long-term stability, or if you're deliberately getting into the income property business. Buying a duplex or student housing with the intention of generating cash flow.
So ultimately, the entire philosophy of wealth creation learned from Georgette just boils down to that one word.
Discipline. It is the conscious, consistent ability to say no to immediate purchases and instead allow that money to work for you. He stresses that the wealthy consistently maintain this discipline, and it's exemplified by keeping an untouchable nest egg.
For example,
For instance, having $5 million parked safely in T-bills that they never, ever touch, regardless of how well their other riskier ventures are doing.
let's clarify T-bills for the learner. Why are these U.S. government treasury bills the ultimate secure nest egg?
Well, T-bills are short-term debt instruments backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. They are considered virtually risk-free.
Okay.
So when you're talking about parking $5 million that you absolutely cannot lose, money meant for a catastrophic failure or an immediate opportunity, you need liquidity and you need safety. T-bills provide that security, typically for a year or less, giving you a predictable low-risk return while guaranteeing the principal is there when you need it.
It's the definition of stable cash.
It is.
This theme of discipline brings us right to arguably the most important and often financially devastating decision a person will ever make.
Choosing a life partner.
The sources warn explicitly about the geometric loss of wealth caused by a bad marital choice.
And the geometric loss is so devastating because divorce involves two distinct levels of financial destruction. First, you're paying the ex-spouse through asset division. But second, you're paying the government.
Through capital gains taxes.
Often through capital gains triggered by the forced liquidation of assets, selling off real estate or stock portfolios, that's required to settle the divorce.
Can you give us a hypothetical to make that geometric loss more concrete?
Sure. Imagine an entrepreneur builds up a $10 million portfolio over a decade. It's mostly in non-liquid startup equity and real estate. In a divorce, half of that has to go to the spouse.
So $5 million is immediately gone.
Gone. But to pay that spouse, the entrepreneur has to liquidate assets that have appreciated a lot. If that liquidation triggers, say, a 20% capital gains tax on the appreciation, maybe another $1.5 million is gone to the government.
So you've lost $6.5 million from a $10 million portfolio.
And your former spouse has $5 million, but your effective net worth has been taxed and reduced all the way back down to $3.5 million. The geometric loss is immense and it's irreversible.
The source also found through research that financial stress, not infidelity, is the silent killer of marriages.
He commissioned interviews with top divorce lawyers and found that while most marriages can actually recover from infidelity,
They cannot recover from sustained financial stress.
a staggering 90% of unions break up because of classic financial pressure. Typically, it's rooted in one partner's spending habits, their debt, or a lack of shared ambition.
And this happens because partners fail to conduct proper financial due diligence during the, honeymoon phase of the relationship.
Exactly.
So how should the learner apply financial rigor to the dating scene?
He advocates for discussing money and long-term financial ambitions very early, ideally by the third date.
The third day.
He argues that marriage is fundamentally a business partnership, and since money will be the first child sitting at the table every single day, you have to assess financial compatibility before emotional entanglement gets too deep.
He identifies 5 financial archetypes or love languages from the book Men and Women of Money, and 4 of them are absolute warning signs.
Yes, these are the red flags you have to spot immediately. There's the mooch, who's looking for immediate financial support, the spendaholic, who buys things they don't need because of insecurity,
The loafer.
who lacks ambition and drive, and the thief, someone with zero financial integrity.
And the one partner worth pursuing.
You must marry a meanie. The meanie is the balanced spender, the partner who lives within their means, who respects Georgette's principles, and who saves aggressively. Those marriages built on shared financial discipline are the ones that last.
Okay, let's pivot sharply to the massive technological forces that are disrupting all these financial equations, starting with AI.
Right.
Our source describes this as immense and bigger than the internet. We really need to slow this down and detail the tangible use cases.
The assessment of AI being larger than the internet is based on the immediate, tangible reduction of cost, time, and risk that it offers across really entrenched industries. Let's look at the wine business example, a 1,000-year-old industry just suddenly modernized.
Okay, detail that wine business use case and the cost savings involved.
So historically, if a large wine distributor wanted to know what varietals would sell best in southern Florida during the summer, they'd spend upwards of $1 million on traditional market research. And that would take 6 months to complete.
$1 million in 6 months.
Now, using advanced AI tools, costing maybe $18,000, he can instantly determine that, for example, the #1 varietal for women aged 44 to 64 in that region is Moscato, a sweet wine.
So he can allocate capital expenditure to inventory that precise product.
Exactly, minimizing inventory risk and maximizing profit with just unparalleled precision. That is massive productivity.
And the content production use case demonstrates the potential job disruption in white-collar creative fields.
This is truly disruptive. He describes shooting a commercial using a state-of-the-art studio with a 6K digital wall. AI links the script directly to the background environments.
Which eliminates the need for expensive location shoots and post-production time.
Right, a commercial that might typically take a week and cost millions can be shot in 4 hours for a fraction of the price.
And the final piece of that example, the creation of the AI agent, that's what signals the true scale of the disruption.
Exactly. They demonstrated creating an AI Kevin agent that can reshoot the commercial without the human ever being present. The AI agent can translate and revoice the ad instantly into Spanish, Japanese, or Arabic.
Complete with synchronized lip movement.
This just eliminates the need for foreign production teams, saving millions and making global distribution immediate. This is where AI moves from optimization to the wholesale replacement of certain roles.
This intense technological reliance on processing power brings us to the crucial strategic element, the control of the hardware, which he calls the Queen Bee chip.
This is a national security and economic concern that requires deep focus. He uses the analogy of Jobs and Wozniak applied to the future.
How so?
The chip, the core hardware made by companies like NVIDIA, AMD, or Intel, is the Queen Bee. The vast ecosystem of programmers, software developers, and AI models built on top of that hardware are the honeybees that produce the honey, which is the data and innovation.
So if the chip is the Queen Bee, why is restricting its sale a significant danger even to national interests?
The danger isn't the immediate denial of technology, it's the loss of competitive advantage over the long term. When policymakers shut off access to the American Queen Bee chip to an adversary,
Say a company like Huawei in China.
that adversary is then forced to develop and place their queen bee in the center of the global hive. By restricting access, you cut off the genius programmers and honeybees in that market from writing code for the American platform.
And over time, the American platform, the Queen Bee, loses its dominance.
Exactly. He warns that the country with the superior AI infrastructure will win the wars of the future, which will be fought by highly advanced drones and robots. Control of that core hardware is existential.
Finally, let's discuss crypto, which he now sees as rapidly maturing from pure speculation into a legitimate asset class.
He recognizes its accelerating utility. He now views crypto as the 12th sector of the S&P 500,
Why?
primarily because of the productivity benefits it offers the other 11 sectors. And his portfolio reflects this confidence. He's currently allocating 19.1% to the sector.
Kept just under Georgette's strict 20% diversification limit.
He's still following the rules.
And he makes a crucial distinction between assets used for utility and assets used for speculation.
Exactly. Bitcoin is seen as digital gold, a highly volatile speculation. The real tangible potential lies in infrastructure and digital payment systems, specifically stablecoins like USDC.
And he sees the potential passing of the Genius Act, or Stablecoin Act, as legitimizing their use as money.
Yes. Stablecoins offer faster, cheaper, and less invasive international transfers than traditional banking. For instance, if you want to order a bespoke watch from a master watchmaker in Switzerland, a wire transfer takes days, involves high fees, and is complex.
With stablecoins.
That transfer is near instantaneous for a fraction of the cost. It makes global commerce radically more efficient.
Okay, so we've established the full framework: internal focus, disciplined execution, wealth management, and relationship rigor. We finish with the philosophical underpinnings of long-term success, starting with the immense value of brand integrity.
This is the ultimate capstone of the successful entrepreneur: authenticity. He stresses that your real value isn't your product or your net worth, it's your community and your followers. And that authenticity has to be maintained at all costs.
And the warning here about sacrificing brand integrity for a short-term gain is really the final measure of discipline.
Never endorse a product or service that you wouldn't personally use or invest in yourself. The source is very blunt. The minute your audience senses a lack of authenticity or transparency in some cash grab endorsement, he says, you're fucked.
He emphasizes that he's turned down massive offers, deals worth millions.
Millions of dollars, yes. Because his gut check told him they felt like noise that would taint the brand he'd spent decades building. And that is the highest level of freedom, the ability to say no to money.
He also advises that the pursuit of longevity must shift from a passing interest into a mandatory signal.
Starting in your 30s, you have to make investments in your diet, in rigorous sleep discipline, and in consistent exercise. If you're pursuing massive, multi-decade success, the kind that requires 80% signal focus, you need the physical and mental stamina to potentially live and work effectively until you're 100 or 120.
Longevity becomes an investment, not a luxury.
It has to.
So after achieving that freedom, after all the accumulation is complete, what is the ultimate definition of happiness?
It is not a destination. It's not a fleeting emotional state. It's a consistent, repeatable process. Happiness, he concludes, is defined by consistently achieving your goals.
Whether those goals are the 3 daily signals on your sticky note,
Or the 20-year financial mandate of Georgette's strategy. The continuous act of achievement is the journey itself.
And this brings us back to that final decision point, the intuitive check. Even with all the data and the discipline, the successful entrepreneur has to rely on that gut check to prevent sacrificing their integrity.
Yes, the defining moment of true freedom is knowing that no amount of money can cause you to compromise who you are. The discipline isn't just about saving money, it's about defining your personal limits. Being the captain of your own brand means maintaining the integrity of that brand against all external financial pressures.
So you now have the complete framework laid out. Prioritize ruthlessly using the signal-to-noise ratio, invest with Georgette's long-term, index-focused discipline, and apply rigorous due diligence to your life partner choices to avoid that geometric loss of wealth. But this leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the learner, to consider as you pursue your own freedom. We know the drive comes from the undying love of freedom, and yet once that financial and personal freedom is achieved, once the $5 million nest egg is parked safely in T-bills, the successful few rarely retire. They view the continual challenge as a sport.
Right.
So if you have achieved massive wealth and total freedom, where does the drive come from? Is the ultimate goal simply to keep finding new, difficult challenges? Or is it a restless engine that just never slows down? How would you define when you have enough?